the interest of time, I think we'll get going, and as people arrive, they'll be able to come into the meeting. So I am Melanie Woke, and I'd like to thank you for joining us this evening. I am chair of the Alberta Beef Producers, and I, along with my family, ranch in the Northeast Zone near Bowalen. Please be aware that we are recording tonight's session, and so it will be available later on abpdaily.com. If you couldn't attend one of our in-person producer meetings this year, we're happy you are with us virtually tonight. You will hear from not only ABP, but the Canadian Cattlemen's Association, as producers across the province have over the last 2 weeks. We'll have time for discussions, and hopefully some resolutions will be brought forward tonight. Attendance in the South Zones was extremely good, and by the amount of discussion and questions, producer engagement was extremely impressive. We still do have some work to do in the North and Central regions, as attendance was significantly lower and resolutions were only put forward in the Northeast Zone. Being a delegate from the Northeast Zone, I know that our industry needs strong engagement to shed light on our issues and to continue to keep the northern and central parts of the province engaged. Let's get our fellow producers in the North talking about ABP. Since we're a smaller group tonight, and we were able to hold meetings in each zone, we won't be breaking out into groups tonight. Rather, we want producers participating to engage with each other. And when it comes time to vote on resolutions, we'll ask that you only vote on resolutions if it is brought forward from your zone. There is a link to the ABP zone map and county listing by zone in the chat if anyone is unsure of their zone. There's also a link in the chat to our 2021 annual report if you'd like to reference it throughout the meeting. Please use the raise hand button if you'd like to speak, and wait for someone to call on you. That button is located at the bottom of your screen under the reactions button. Attendees calling in, they will need to unmute themselves if they'd like to speak, and they can do this by pressing *6. You are free to use the chat function to engage with others in the meeting, and we will be monitoring it for questions and comments throughout the evening. However, if yours is missed, please raise your hand and somebody will acknowledge you. I would now like to introduce the other members of the Alberta Beef Producers Executive. We have Finance Chair Brody Hogan, who ranches in the Southeast Zone near Orion. We have Past Chair Kelly Smith-Fraser, who ranches in the Southwest Zone near Pine Lake. Unfortunately, our Vice Chair Jason Hale, who ranches in the Southeast Zone near Bassano, was unable to attend tonight. So we're going to get started, and I think I am first up. So I will just get my presentation on here and we'll get going. Thumbs up, Brad. Good. Perfect.
Melanie, you're actually in presenter view, so we can see your upcoming notes. Just go to display settings at the top.
I thought you weren't supposed to be able to see that.
If you just go to display settings, kind of in the middle, it will, you can switch the view.
So I've stopped sharing now, right?
Correct.
Okay. There we go. Better?
Perfect. Perfect.
Yes.
Thanks. So again, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Alberta Beef Producers. I hope I have the right presentation up yet. 2022 producer meeting, virtual meeting. As you all know, our organization is a group of producers that is working for producers, and that the board of directors is elected by delegates at the ABP annual general meeting. Executive members, which are the chair, the vice chair, the finance chair, are elected by the board of directors, and the past chair also serves on the executive for 1 year after their chair position. This year, as I said, we didn't have superb attendance from the North and Central regions, and we do see a little bit more representation from the South on the board of directors. There is myself from the Northeast zone, Mike Nadeau from the Northwest zone, and Colin Campbell and Rod Carlian from the Central zone. The rest of it is made up of producers from the Southeast and the Southwest zones, and their names are up. As most of you know on this call tonight, we are a producer organization and we are an industry advocacy group. We currently say we are the voice of over 18,000 producers. We're trying to get a better handle on that number and try and figure out exactly who we're serving in this province. We have had issues with knowing who our membership is, and we are currently working very hard on fixing that, and that is something that our general manager, Brad Dubo, will get into a bit later. You all know that you are funded by a $4.50 checkoff fee every time you sell an animal in this province. I just want to reiterate that $2.50 of that fee is the non-refundable levy. That goes to Canada Beef, which is marketing. It goes to the Beef Cattle Research Council and to public and stakeholder engagement. That is money that you cannot pull back. The refundable portion of the service charge is $2. That is the money that goes to fund the Canadian Cattlemen's Association. There's often still some confusion as to how the Canadian Cattlemen's Association is funded. It is not through the levy, it is through the provincial refundable portion. If you pull back your $2, ABP still remits the 53 cents to the Canadian Cattlemen's Association. So we are remitting on our gross numbers of marketed animals in this province and not the net amount that we retain. And this has resulted in some budgetary constraints for us over the last few years, which has really come to a significant issue this year. It's been spoken about in our magazine. We have decided that it was best for us to be clear with the organization about exactly where our finances are standing, and part of the reason for that. Brad again will talk a little bit more about where that money is being removed from and what we have to look forward to as we move ahead. Again, we are a member of the Canadian Cattlemen's Association. That is your national lobbying group, as well as trade and other federal type programs that they work with. And again, I mentioned Beef Cattle Research Council and public and stakeholder engagement, which come out of the national levy. What do we do? Our work on behalf of producers, we cover a lot of ground in this province. It's a very large province with very variable issues. We tend to have to work through those issues of importance as they come to us. Obviously, things are always changing and shifting. We are constantly pushing for increased market access and demand. We work closely with the government, both with our provincial government, but we also do some national fly-ins with the federal government. There is money that goes into research and innovation and land and water issues as well. And we are constantly trying to engage and involve producers and young producers in how they want this organization driven. I just want to say here that we recognize that it's difficult bringing young producers into this industry. I have brought it up continually with both the Northern and Southern Rural Caucuses, as well as the Rural Municipality Associations, that we need to figure out how to keep young Albertans in rural Alberta, not only in our industry, but also in things like veterinary medicine. There needs to be some type of push for them and reason for them to stay. And Alberta Beef is definitely recognizing that our membership is getting older and that we need to get some of these young producers back in the game. Our priorities, our number one priority, obviously, is the viability of our industry as a whole. And as I mentioned, a lot of that is falling on this next generation and trying to get them back into the beef industry. Stewardship and private and public lease lands. There were some issues on road allowances this year in the southern part of the province. There's also discussions as to a new framework for crown leases. And so we are deeply involved in that. We have grown exponentially in our communications, I believe. I have said at every meeting that I've been at, if you don't know what's going on at ABP, then you are really trying not to know what's going on at ABP. We have the new magazine platform. We have abpdaily.com. There is the ABP app. There is the new podcast that has just come out. This has been on the board's agenda for years, and I believe that we have made significant strides to improve our communications with our producers. We really want to maintain pride and confidence in the Alberta Beef brand. It is known worldwide. It is an exceptional product, and that is something that we continue to try and put forward. Again, research and extension is a large part of ABP, and issues management, which is mostly dealing with the public and consumers and how they view our industry, as well as emergency preparedness, things like disease. What would we do if we were hit with foot and mouth disease tomorrow? These are all things that oftentimes one producer brought up in one of the zones that, you know, you really know when you need an organization like this or like Alberta Cattle Feeders or Western Stock Growers, is when you have problems and you need some help. Oftentimes when things are running along smoothly and really not seeing many problems, I think that people forget that all this is going on in the background and that we are constantly monitoring situations and trying to prepare for what might come down the pipe. Work that is done with the provincial service charge funds, government relations and policy work. As I said, we work closely with the provincial government. A lot of producers call me and tell me that their MLAs don't know anything about the beef industry. There's a lot of ignorance out there, especially because our industry is one of the leading economic drivers in this province and should be top of mind. But we have to remember that they are constantly being bombarded with every other industry in the province. COVID's put a lot of strain on the province economically. So we need a group to be there to continually remind them of our issues and our needs and what we need to be working on. We also work with other funded organizations to ensure that research and projects that are being done address the priorities of the producers in this province, and mainly that is to keep us sustainable and current. So we, as I've said, we continue to work on marketing. Quite a bit of money has been pulled out of our educational initiatives because of the funding issues that we have, but we do continue to try and build consumer support and trust. Our consumers have been very good to us. I don't know, if you remember when we went through BSE, that we were one of the only countries where beef consumption went up instead of down. So we are very reliable on our consumers and continue to hope that they trust and enjoy our product. As I said, we have the ABP magazine, ABP Daily. We try and get onto radio and print as much as we can. We often get criticized for not being on TV or on the radio enough. Very expensive to do unless they invite you to do it. So we try and stay as visible as we can. The Canadian Cattlemen's Association, as I said, you are funding that through your national checkoff, dealing with international trade and federal lobbying. The CCA has also, Bob will talk more about what they do, but leaders in business risk management, and they have taken a very strong position regarding environmental issues and sustainability. I realize that sometimes we, as producers, kind of maybe roll our eyes a little bit because we realize the importance of grazing species on the landscape and the sustainability that they offer. But there's a generation coming up behind some of us that possibly doesn't feel as strongly about that. So the CCA has decided that they are going to pursue that and put our efforts forward. As far as this presentation is, sorry, a little bit different than the one I was expecting. As far as what we've done lately, we have, again, the communications we have put forward, we have tried to improve and make producers more aware of exactly what we're doing, collaborated with other groups, agri-recovery. So that is something that we worked diligently on, not only the board and the executive, but the staff was fantastic in putting in hours and hours of time into the drought issues, into developing an agri-recovery program. I realize that the agri-recovery is not perfect. Some people are not, it's not great in everybody's mind, but it is the best option that we came up with. And we believe that our work with the government resulted in it, and actually the government and AFSC working quite quickly in getting this off and running and getting payments out much more quickly than we've seen in the past. So we were very happy about that. Another big issue right now is the veterinary shortage. I get a lot of calls about this. Being a veterinarian, I have been involved deeply in different committees, as well as speaking with the dean of the veterinary college and other commodity groups. It's reached a critical point. It's been something that we have, it is something that we have been talking about since I started practice in 1993. We were starting to notice a shortage at that point. And we have been working diligently to try and figure out a solution. There's certain short-term things that we're working on that will hopefully change. But really the question at the end of the day is how do we keep young women veterinarians in rural Alberta? Because that is what is coming out of vet school. 85 to 90% of the graduates are female, and we need to figure out how to keep them working. And I believe that is all I have tonight. I can now open up the floor for any questions you might have. Yeah, I see Fred's hand is up.
Hi, Melanie.
Hi.
So in the Brooks meeting, the Minister of Agriculture was there, and he said something about there'll be an announcement about a vet shortage. Can you give us any insights? Do you know anything, or is it yet to be determined?
I believe it's yet to be determined. It hasn't come across the pipe what's happened yet. I know that in Ontario, there was an announcement that the province would be putting money into dealing with the shortage. And I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work there, but obviously other provinces are working on the same issues. And I'm looking forward to see what the government of Alberta is going to come up with. They definitely are aware of it. Dave McTaggart.
Hi. Yeah,
Hi.
I just have a question. I'm involved in applied ag research, actually, and I'm originally from Lacombe, but I'm currently based in Saskatchewan. I was just wondering, what is the situation as far as this year on people asking for their refundable checkoffs back? Just curious about what the status on that is.
I'm going to let our general manager, Brad Dubo, answer that one.
So currently for the fiscal that we're in right now, so how it works is the refunds works on a calendar year. So it runs from January to June and then from July to December. Our fiscal year runs from April to March. So right now we are just finishing up where our refunds are at. So we finalized, and basically people could get their refund request in until up until January 31st. And so we're continuing to work on what it looks like for the last calendar year. And initial indications is showing some positive movement, maybe a little bit of a dip, which is wonderful, but we're still yet to get those final numbers. So probably in about 3 to 4 weeks, David, if you and I connected, I could give you a better number of where we're at for the last calendar year.
Perfect. Thank you, Brad.
You bet.
If that is it for questions, I'm going to move along to the financial video, which is going to be, which was presented by our financial chair, Brodie Hogan. Perfect. Thank you.
No sound, Caitlin.
Two and a half years and this stuff just never does work smoothly. So we'll hope we can get some sound on.
Hello, my name is Brodie Hogan. I am the finance chair for the Alberta Beef Producers. I ranch alongside my family in the southeast corner of the province by Orion, Alberta, and I am a part of the southeast zone for the Alberta Beef Producers. This is the Alberta Beef Producers financial position as of March 31st, 2021. The financial statements in the annual report have been audited and found in order by Kingston Ross Pasnick LLP. The statement of operations reflects net revenue from the Alberta service charge and non-refundable national levy of approximately $16 million, which is comparable to the prior year. ABP collected $9.1 million in national levy payments, which were forwarded to the Canadian Beef Checkoff Agency, who retain a small percentage for operations. The balance was allocated to Canada Beef, the Beef Cattle Research Council, and to public and stakeholder engagement, based upon an allocation determined annually by the ABP Board of Directors. Operating expenses for ABP were approximately $4.6 million. These expenses are listed in Schedule 1 of the financial statements in the annual report. ABP issued 965 service charge refunds for a total of approximately $3 million for the 2 refund periods in 2020, representing roughly 46% of the service charge collected. ABP is working to improve producer confidence in our organization by demonstrating value for the work done on their behalf and strengthening our communications. The Canadian Cattlemen's Association assessment, based upon Alberta's marketings, has a budget of $2.1 million. Through CCA, ABP is involved in policy and trade advocacy efforts with federal governments as well as US and international markets. You can review the 2021-22 ABP operations budget in the annual report. The ABP board has allocated $3.2 million for operations based on retained service charge revenue from the prior year and allocations from unrestricted net assets. The operations budget is allocated as follows. 4% is allocated to governance and oversight. Expenses include the cost of having an elected board of directors and executive and audit and governance committees to assist the commission in achieving Alberta beef producers' mission. 7% is allocated to government relations and policy. Expenses include costs to identify, examine, and address issues of importance to the Alberta cattle industry, and to ensure that policies and regulations support the interests of the Alberta cattle industry. 20% is allocated to communications and marketing. Expenses include the costs to communicate to and engage with Alberta producers to showcase Alberta beef and define the industry. 6% is allocated to national policy, trade advocacy, and legal. ABP invests in efforts to promote policy, regulations, and programs to improve international market access. As well, CCA's provincial members have agreed to share the legal costs for international trade actions. 8% is allocated to stakeholder relations. Expenses related to building strong collaborative relations with Alberta producers, the media, and industry stakeholders. 4% is allocated to production and extension. Expenses related to the enhanced competitiveness of Alberta producers in the area of research and production and long-term sustainable access to land and water. 21% is allocated to staff associated with programs. For ABP to achieve its vision of being a strong, representative voice working on behalf of cattle producers in Alberta, staff are needed to implement, monitor, and report on programs. 30% is allocated to administrative expenses. This area reflects the office and administrative expenses incurred to provide the infrastructure needed to support the business conducted by ABP. For further details, please consult the financial statements beginning on page 18 of the annual report.
Thanks, Brody. Does anybody have any questions regarding the financials? Brody would be more than happy to answer them. I don't see any right now, so we will keep moving along. I would now, oh, Gordon, yep.
Yeah, Brody, you had talked about our commitment to trade challenges, and it was lumped in with some other things on the same percentage. Can you elaborate on how much is exactly put into the war chest, so to speak? And I'm referring back to in days gone by with RCAF and USA and all those other wingnut groups that we've had to deal with.
As far as specific numbers that were spent in the previous year, I'd have to get back to you on the exact numbers. But yes, we do still have a trade advocacy fund within our budget for any future activities that we may have to go battle for our industry and for both Alberta and the national industry. So we still do have that fund in place, but it is dwindling, and we'll touch on that further in the discussion tonight on how some of those, hopefully we're correcting them moving forward here. So.
Thanks, Gordon. Does anybody else have any questions? All right, we will move forward. So next I would like to introduce Brad Dubo. He is our general manager, and he is going to give us a presentation on a few key things going on at ABP right now.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mel. And wonderful to see all of you that took the time out of your schedules to join us this evening for our last producer meeting. this year prior to our AGM coming up on March 2nd. A couple of things that I want to discuss with the group tonight is revolving around some of the decisions that the board of directors has made recently. And I want to start off with, I will share my screen here. Okay. Everything look okay there, Mel? Perfect. So one of the things I want to start off with is to talk a little bit about when I initially was moved into the position of general manager. One of the things that the executive had asked me at the time, as well as the board, was, you know, the ongoing conversation around communications with producers, and that was proving to still be a massive topic amongst our producers within the industry. And so we wanted to try and take a really aggressive step to just simply change up our communications from how we were doing it into something new and different. So as Mel mentioned, we launched a magazine. The magazine is producer orientated and directed at producers, and it's an opportunity for us to communicate with producers about the things going on at ABP, but as well as other organizations can utilize that magazine at no charge, like Western Stockbrokers or AGLA or cattle feeders, and of course all of our national industry organizations like Canada Beef, CCA, and so forth. And the whole idea is that we wanted to provide a venue, a tool that for those individuals that still wanted to sit down in the evening with a magazine. I should step back for a second. we've had a few folks join our staff to take on these new communication tools. And so we had Lindsay Roberts and Deborah Murphy join our team. Lindsay Roberts is our marketing and communications manager, and Deborah Murphy is our content specialist. And just recently, we also had a new executive and accounting assistant join us, Paulina Nocera. But since I'm pointing out those three newer individuals to our organization, I want to take the time right now to say thank you to my staff, the remainder, Laura Percunier, Caitlin Lavender, Mark Lysing, Deborah Murphy, and Megan McLeod, all individuals that have worked so hard, especially the last year. We've had a lot of challenges that we've been dealing with. But part of coming back to our communications tools was developing something new and exciting that producers could connect with. So at the very first board meeting, when we did start to talk about what those communication tools could look like, one of the things was brought up, I initially brought up, was a magazine. And some of our younger directors at the time questioned, do we do a magazine or should we just all go digital? That we prefer to get our information on either on our computer or on our handhelds. And some of our more seasoned directors suggested, you know, we still like to sit down and read an article in the evening with paper. So it's a difference in the demographics of our makeup. And we decided that we would try and launch several of them, keeping in mind that we redirected investment that was used for old tools, somewhere in the neighborhood of just under $200,000, into the new tools. And that involved a development process. And we worked with a company that we've worked with for the last few years to help us develop these new tools. And the whole idea was to provide a tool that hopefully individuals would find useful, or producers would find very useful, in the sense that they might want to engage with us because they valued the product, especially in the magazine. And they would want to advertise, and it mostly revolves around seed stock producers, but as well as businesses, being able to know that they would have a firm tool to advertise in that would get to producers. So that the whole idea is that the magazine was doing its job, and we were connecting with producers, and producers were finding value in those stories, that we would then be able to generate advertising in that communication tool, and hopefully eventually move to a revenue neutral situation in our communications under the magazine element of the program. So that is something that in its first year has grown substantially. It's difficult. It's a brand new magazine, and we're building a reputation. There's lots of varying opinions on it. But the biggest thing is that I'm excited about is we know that it has created discussion, and we know that producers are engaging with us a little bit differently than they have before. And they have comments and suggestions about what we could do, but it's based on some of these new tools that we've launched. And it doesn't mean that we won't adjust and maneuver these tools as we move down the road. But it's one of the exciting things that ABP has launched in order to reconnect with producers on a much wider base and on a more regular basis. So, but after we had launched into that and we were moving down the road, it became very apparent because marketings had gone up in our fiscal prior to this year, the year that we're in right now. And so our CCA assessment was significantly higher, which was going to put a lot of pressure on ABP's operating budget. So in the magazine, we ran a 3-part series, and this goes back to what Mel spoke about a little bit earlier, about trying to just highlight the whole situation around where ABP was at with its fiscal situation and the very difficult decisions that the board of directors was considering at the time. And so we probably looked at a good 10 to 12 budgets, and the board of directors looked at probably 10 to 12 different draft budgets as we were trying to fulfill our commitment to CCA to the best of our ability, but at the same token, be able to make sure that we were funding ABP the way it needed to be funded in order to accomplish the strategic objectives that were set out and reviewed every year by the delegate body. So one of the things that I think it's really important that we need to highlight is that of the almost 30 million in provincial checkoff dollars refunded since the 2009 implementation of the refundable provincial checkoff, 13% of Alberta producers who have asked for refunds are responsible for 87% of requests, meaning that less than 2,400 producers have requested $26 million in refunds. And we're not trying to point fingers or anything like that. For whatever reasons that those individuals have for taking a refund is something that we accept and we are trying to work on, obviously, to reduce. But at the same token, we want to make sure that producers are aware, and this is something that I've tried to stress in all of the face-to-face meetings, is that the vast majority of Alberta producers still do support the organization. And so it's important that I think that everybody understands that for whatever reason they are, maybe our organization needs to change, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Or maybe, there are other reasons that they find that it's important for them to do that. But regardless, what we're trying to do is, or what we want people to understand is that the vast majority are still actually supporting the organization. But going back for a moment, one of the things that was leading up to this whole very challenging conversation is that since 2009, there's always been a conversation around, as funds were starting to, there was growing refunds, so funds were getting shorter in supply at ABP. There's been the conversation of how did they fund everything. And one of the things was in 2018, Alberta, along with every other province in Canada, agreed that 53 cents of every marketing would be directed to the CCA. And we were, like I say, among those that agreed to that particular number. And it was kind of deemed, at least is how it's been presented to myself, that 48 cents was really probably more of the amount that they needed to make sure that they had the funds to operate. And the extra 5 cents was to build a bit of a war chest in the event that there was a situation that they needed to engage in. And so the board of directors, ABP's board of directors, had decided in past years that they would fulfill the 48 cents, but they were going to hold back on the extra 5 cents because they were troubled in trying to justify taking from Alberta Beef Producers Reserve to give to a potential trade fund or war chest at the CCA. And so it was very difficult for them to go through, but that was a decision that has been made or was made. And it was based on, this whole agreement is based on 5 years. So it ends June of 2023. And July 1st of 2023, there will either be a new deal or commitment or just lost for the word, but essentially we'll be working with CCA and other provinces on what does that new funding agreement look like going forward July 1st of 2023 and forward. But after a lot of discussion at our board level in the last fiscal, as we were preparing for this current fiscal, we had decided that it would be best to fulfill our commitment of the 53 cents up until the end of June of 2023, because that was a deal that we made. And we wanted to make sure that we did fulfill that commitment. Now, depending on marketings and refunds, that will determine if how much we need to go into reserves to fulfill that commitment. But one of the things that coming out of just the most recent board meeting, one of the most recent board meeting was that, before I move on, I just want to say one thing. That decision, sorry, lost my train. This is different on Zoom versus face-to-face. But so the decision coming out of a recent board meeting was that ABP has requested that we be assessed from the CCA on retained marketing. And that request would then put us into a position where we could maintain a $3 million budget for ABP, which is determined at this point in time is the appropriate amount of dollars for us to fulfill our strategic objectives, but would leave about $1 million for the CCA, which really important to highlight here. That is a very significant cut to CCA though, of about $1 million, just depending on where marketings lie. So obviously this is a concern for CCA, and it is a concern for Alberta beef producers, because we don't want to not be able to pay our full share. Part of our budgeting last year also included, unfortunately, cuts to other organizations that ABP was instrumental in creating, like Cows and Fish and Ag Safe, for example. Two organizations that were partially developed by ABP. So it's difficult to start to have to cut all the different organizations in order to make sure that we have the proper amount to make sure that Alberta beef producers can do its job. So one of the things that we have struck is, since I have been given my direction from our board of directors on how things will look July 1st of 2023 and moving forward, I made a firm commitment that I would strike a working group. That working group right now consists of myself and the vice chair, Jason Hale, who couldn't be with us tonight, as co-chairs. And then we have selected one individual from each of the zones that will participate on a committee or a working group that will start to initially look at what might, some of the changes we might need to consider at the commission. So when I say not Alberta beef producers and I say the commission, is because as we move into this process, we will first look at, do we need to expand that working group first and foremost with a few more people from Alberta beef producers, so that we can start to determine how things could manipulate. But then the broader group will be invited in. And when I say broader group, we would like to invite Alberta Cattle Feeders, Western Stock Growers, Alberta Grazing Leaseholders Association, to sit down and start to have a conversation about how we can get back to a fully funded Alberta beef industry. Even if there are changes that have to potentially come to the commission, I think we all have to agree that there will be a commission. We need a commission in Alberta. And it's important, I believe, it's important that instead of starting from scratch, that we start to look at this as what we have, and let's see if we can come together as group, as all of our groups, to make sure that we can move on in a strong industry where our voices can be tied together, and we look forward to working together. And so I think it's going to be a very, very busy year, because we essentially are going to try and address the situation that we're facing with the shortfall prior to July 1st of 2023. Now, it's a monumental task, but we're going to give it our best shot. And I know we've started to have a few discussions, just even from the producer meetings, the face-to-face with some of the different organizations. And there's a desire to sit down and start to talk about it, because in the end, we need to have a strong Alberta beef industry in order to make sure that we are all representing producers in Alberta, but also across the country to the best of our ability. And so these are some of the steps that we have taken. It's been very challenging for the board of directors, but we're slowly making steps to what I think is a very open dialogue about what we can do to make a successful commission that works together with those organizations that have memberships and all work together to represent our producers or our members. So that leads me into the next part of my conversation. And one of the challenges with this whole program is connecting with producers. So it's one thing to develop all the tools. The second part is making sure they're getting into the right hands. Now, when COVID struck and there was no option, we were going to have to hold online elections and only producer meetings that were virtual. We needed to do some sort of an online voting system. And even though there was always a bit of we knew that maybe the mailing list wasn't as good as it could be, it was made quite apparent that our mailing list was not in as good a shape as it needed to be. And so at the board, this has always been a conversation, but after that particular project, it really elevated at the board. So I set out on trying to find different avenues. And so we explored different other organizations and so forth that we might be able to work together. A lot of our difficulties revolve around the privacy issues. So after exploring a little bit deeper, we were able, working with Alberta Beef Producers legal representatives, we were able to identify an opportunity where Alberta beef producers could start to require producers to provide their contact information, being their name, address, phone number, and if they have an email, that would be wonderful, but that wouldn't be required. But the whole idea is to be able to identify, and with the changes or with technology now, this is not something that producers have to identify with us directly. We can use technology that exists today. There will be no added work for anybody. It's simply a transfer of information. This information would remain private within Alberta Beef Producers. It would not be shared, and it would not be used as a spamming tool or anything like that. It is our opportunity to make sure that we can connect with producers, to make sure that we are administering the plan, the regulation, and any other regulation made under the Act in respect to the Commission. Because our challenge is producers, if we are unable to identify the producers that are actively marketing cattle in the 2 years under our current regulations that are eligible to vote, if we can't connect with those producers, they will struggle, or we will struggle to communicate with them on things that are happening within the organization. So this is a wonderful opportunity that we have undertaken in order to make that communication that one step better. And it will finally give us, and Alberta Beef Producers, the opportunity to make sure that they are connecting with producers. And like I say, it's not a tool to use for spam or anything like that. It is simply to make sure that we're connecting with producers and they are getting the most up-to-date information available from the Commission. So where we're at in this process, so recently at a board of directors meeting, the board approved the proposed amendments to the commission regulation. Right now is our consultation with the producers through our face-to-face meetings, and then tonight is our final meeting of consultation with producers. Then we'll move to consultation with the livestock dealers, like order buyers, livestock markets, and the processing facilities. Once we're finished all of that, we'll gather the comments from all of the different meetings and consultation, and we'll take that to the AGM for the delegates to debate. And I would hope, I'm encouraging that we do adopt this new technology to be able to connect with our producers. And if it does get adopted at the AGM, then we make the presentations to Marketing Council, and from Marketing Council, then to the Ledge Council drafters to actually draft the amendment to the Alberta Beef Producers Commission regulation. This is a really exciting time because I know this has been a terrible struggle for staff and for the board for years. And so now that technology allows us to move in this new direction, I think this is a really a fantastic opportunity for our commission and producers to be drawn just that little bit closer together to finally be able to really make sure they understand what's happening in the organization and make sure they know how and who to talk to at the organization when they have concerns, comments, or whatever the case may be. And I want to just quickly round out with giving one more little plug to the Bovine podcast. So if you haven't heard of the Bovine podcast, this is new, that was launched by my communications team just in January of 2022. There is 2 that have been released. They're fantastic. If you haven't had an opportunity to listen to them, I would really encourage you. You can get to them through the app or through ABP Daily. And I would encourage you to just take the opportunity to take a listen. I think you will really enjoy them. This will be a way that we can connect again with producers using entertainment, but at the same time, there will be very serious topics that producers can learn more about while they're maybe doing chores, driving down the road to wherever they may be going. So just want to give one more shout out to that. And I think that with Mel, I'm ready to take some questions.
Great, thanks. Does anybody have any questions for Brad? I know it's awkward on this type of platform, but
Gordon's got one there. Hi, Gordon.
Yeah, Brad, I really appreciate the efforts that you're making to try and engage producers. But at the same time, when you're talking about the podcasts, and I'll be the first to own up, I have no damned idea how to do those things. But regardless, is it a platform that's also applicable to our consumers?
They absolutely could be, Gordon. It's going to take time. We can't shift the organization in 1 year. You know, we need to develop and build reputations. And with that will come a wider audience. And I think there are applications for consumers. There has been some conversation about how our magazine could potentially reach the consumers. That is a conversation that we're a ways away from yet, because not everybody's quite on the same side, and that's okay. So we listen and we take direction and we determine how we move down that road if it's a choice, because there'll probably need to be some adjustments. But I would say yes, 100%, Gordon, there is consumer applications here. We just need to, in my opinion, make sure that we have a strong audience within the Alberta producer community so that the buy-in is there from the producers and they feel that we're moving in the right direction, and then continue to expand it with time.
anybody else? We're gonna let you off the hook easier here than we did in person there, Brad.
That's okay. I appreciate it. And anybody that has other questions, or concerns, don't hesitate to reach out to me at the office. We can have a conversation about it. And thanks very much.
Perfect, thank you. So now we're gonna move on to thanking AFSC. They did sponsor our coffee breaks at the in-person meetings with coffee and some pastries, and we'd like to thank them for that. And we have Bobby Joe Curley. I hope I said your name right, Bobby Joe. I've been trying to figure out whether it's Curl or Curly, but Bobby Joe is an AFSC insurance team leader, and she has joined us tonight just to say a few words from AFSC.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. I am going to share my screen while I'm saying it is Curl.
Okay.
But I know some names and faces on this call, and they probably would recognize probably Bobby Joe Penner a lot better anyways. So that's all good. So yes, thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you so much to the Alberta Beef Producers for inviting AFSC to present at your in-person and the virtual meeting today. So thank you so much. As mentioned, I am a team leader for the Southwest for insurance at AFSC. It's great to be here today and share some information about AFSC, our key products, and some key topics that are top of mind for all the producers today. I'm sure that most of you are aware that for over 80 years, AFSC has provided Alberta's agriculture producers and agribusinesses with loans, crop insurance, and farm income disaster assistance. We know that you, like your business, are unique, and we commit to providing solutions to help you do what you do best, which is build, grow, and succeed. Today, I'm going to provide a quick overview of our lending and risk management products and leave a little time for some questions and answers at the end. You can also give us a call, head to a local branch, visit us online at afsc.ca. We are here to listen, and we are interested in how we can support your operation. So let's start with AFSC lending. Some of you may be familiar with our lending program or might even be current clients. AFSC has several lending options: our next generation loan, developing producer, Alberta producer, revolving, and agribusiness loans. My favorite features are our competitive interest rates, that we offer loans up to $30 million now, and there's no annual fees or prepayment penalties. Our lending programs are tailored to provide the flexibility you need to grow your operation. At AFSC, we finance land and equipment purchases, working capital, succession planning, breeding, livestock inventory, debt restructuring, and more is indicated on the slide. Our customized loan terms provide you with the stability and finances needed to run your operation at all stages and everything you need to start, support, and grow your operation. AFSC is helping clients with cash flow concerns this year, providing a variety of ways to support clients. One of these ways is to provide lending relief during these tough times. Existing clients can discuss relief payment options with their relationship manager lender based on individual needs. The following options could be considered: interest-only payments, payment deferral options, and loan restructuring or reamortization. So as mentioned, reach out to your relationship manager lending if you have any questions about that. AFSC knows how unpredictable farming in Alberta can be. Our production-based annual insurance offers protection against many perils as seen on the slide. It offers coverage for both dry land and irrigated crops that have an end use of either commercial, pedigreed, specialty oil, industrial, malt, high protein, or organic end uses. This insurance is individualized coverage and reflects what happens on your farm. Our area-based insurance, like our silage green feed or corn heat unit programs, provide protection for your crop based on a chosen area over a specified time. It does not directly reflect what happens on your individual farm. We have added additional adjusters, and they are working hard to resolve claims as quickly as possible this year. Adjusters are deployed across the province to areas of concentrated claims to effectively work through the volume that we have during this peak time. This year, we are projecting over 8,000 claims compared to the 3,000 to 4,000 we receive in a typical year. AFSC's insurance indemnity payouts are predicted to be one of the highest in our 80-year history and will help provide financial relief to an extremely trying year for our clients. The deadline to apply for or make changes to your annual crop insurance is April 30th, as a reminder. Our perennial crop hay insurance offers protections against the perils you see on the slide. Our perennial production-based insurance programs are hay and Export Timothy hay. Both of these offer protection for both dry land and irrigated hay and Export Timothy hay, and like our annual crop insurance, provides a production guarantee based on the average of historical yields and coverage options selected. When production falls below the guaranteed due to one of the insured perils, the shortfall will be paid. Our pasture program offers protection against lack of moisture, pasture growth, and fire and lightning, as long as it's in Alberta and the perimeter is fenced. Our moisture deficiency insurance, or MDI, and satellite yield insurance, or SAT, are area-based program which provide coverage on pasture. MDI uses precipitation information from weather stations across the province, and SAT uses satellite measurements of light absorbed and reflected by the pasture to estimate pasture growth. As a result of producer input meetings we held last fall, the following changes have been implemented for the 2022 year. The first new feature that I'm very happy about will reduce recorded precipitation by 1 millimeter with every daily temperature that is reached at 30 degrees Celsius, when the temperature reaches 30, and by an additional 2 millimeters when the temperature reaches 35 degrees Celsius. Also, minimum moisture, that's hard to say, sorry, minimum moisture thresholds have been increased from 0.1 millimeters to 1 millimeter, which if you use the program, you know this is actually a huge, significant change. The deadline to apply for or make changes to your perennial insurance is the last day of February, which is fast approaching. Another program that I want to highlight and love talking about is our livestock price insurance program. As a risk management tool, LPI is essentially forecasting prices and offering coverage based on what markets expect cattle will be worth in the future. The coverage is then settled against the overall average cash market. This is not based on a producer's personal price or production, and is an index-based program. And by index, I mean we're using a standard weight and class of cattle to measure market performance. The indexing concept is as important as the standardized insurance product, is what allows the program to be flexible, able to insure different weights, types of cattle. You don't have to sell. Your hands aren't tied in this program. The intent of LPI is to be a risk management tool. It is not a marketing tool. With LPI, the cattle are protected against price declines, but producers still need to do their best job they can at marketing their cattle. Essentially, it's a forward-looking price insurance for the future cattle sales. This program was designed for market animals intended for slaughter and not breeding stock. The program helps to manage these risks for cattle and hog producers throughout the various stages of production. Producers pay a premium to receive that forward pricing coverage. And if the market falls below the coverage price in the time frame selected, the producer receives a payment. Choosing the right program is very important. So let's review the 3 cattle ones. Calf. It is designed for the cow-calf producer. Having a tool available to help protect against the unknowns of the fall cattle market and associated price volatility can assist a producer with being more profitable. Feeder. That's designed to ensure feeder cattle using a forecasted future market-driven price. This program is based on local markets and will help producers who background cattle to better manage the risk in today's unpredictable cattle market. And lastly is fed. This offers price insurance for the finished cattle that are intended for slaughter and expected to be grade A or better. This program takes the difficulty out of managing all three risks that producers face, your price, currency, and basis, and combines them all in one product. So the basic mechanics of the insurance itself is pretty simple, and I love this little graph here. So let's take a look at it. This program establishes a coverage level for the client, meaning an insured price level. This is represented by the green line here. The way the program works depends on which way the cash market moves. If it moves up during the time of your policy, you sell the cattle for higher dollars into the market and the insurance doesn't pay. But the market was stronger than your minimum when you bought the coverage. If the cash market falls below your LPI insured coverage, LPI pays the difference between your established settlement index and your LPI coverage. This is intended to make up the difference between what you expected it to be at minimum, your coverage level, and what the market actually was, which is the settlement index. It's really important to note that this program is based on the average Alberta cash market and not what you personally receive for your calves. If you've not already subscribed, another program you may want to consider is AgriStability, which protects your whole farm against significant margin declines. AgriStability gives you whole farm protection. AgriStability protects your farm income based on all your commodities. It offers unique coverage. Coverage is based on your own farm's history. Payments in time of financial distress. It provides you assistance when you're experiencing margin declines greater than 30% due to production loss, adverse market conditions, and increased costs. Access to other credit options and programs. A lot of people don't know this, but AgriStability can assist with eligibility requirements for other credit options like the Advanced Payment Program, which provides cash advances through various farm commodity organizations. And affordable coverage. You get a low-cost risk management program available to all producers. In this program, we'll compare your current year information against the prior 5 years to determine your level of support. If disaster strikes, you can have peace of mind knowing that your farming operation is covered. To be eligible for AgriStability, you must be enrolled by April 30th of the program year that you wish to participate in. This next slide, I really like to share. This is an array of different risks that farmers face that are beyond their control and their capacity to manage. It's really important to note too, a lot of these are not covered by AFSC's traditional crop insurance programs. And these are the extras that why I absolutely love our AgriStability program and why it really gives you that whole farm insurance. So just some important things to keep in mind that our other programs don't cover. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about AFSC's programs with you today. Before I open it up to questions, I wanted to mention our online tools. We have AFSC Connect, Client Chat, and monthly newsletters and email communications. Through AFSC Connect, you can submit electronic forms and applications with ease. And we now have direct deposit for many of our programs, and that gets money into producers' hands so much quicker. With our client communications, you can receive notifications, our field notes newsletter, your LPI premiums and settlement tables, upcoming events, webinars, and information session updates, as well as production information, which could include changes to our existing programs. And you can go in to afsc.ca and choose what you'd like to receive information about. So thank you so much for listening to me today. And I'd like to know if anybody has any questions. I have a hand up. Has it been up for a long time? My apologies.
Yeah, Colin, no. Yeah, Colin Campbell does have his hand up. He just put it up. Colin, go ahead.
Perfect. Did I stop sharing or stop
No,
sharing? There we go.
Oh,
There we go. Now it's just us chatting.
Yeah.
Go
Hi.
ahead, Colin. What can I help you with?
Thank you very much for your presentation, Bobby Joe. Very informative. And I do compliment AFSC and taking into consideration the heat units or the heat, because that was the major factor in the drought here, or the in our area anyway this year. It made a huge difference. Couple comments. LPI, I've looked at it closely over the years, and when I'm paying $75 a head for premiums for calf, basically that works out to about somewhere between 4.5–5% of the value of the calf. And I do not find that as, I'm better off taking risk in the open market without that. If you decide to go to a third, and a third, much like crop insurance, then I bet you your uptake would be much better. You know, even crop insurance, only 50% of the acres in this province are crop insured at a third, and a third share. So, you know, it's a question. And the other comment that I have is that I've received some comments on the Canada-Alberta Livestock Feed Assistance Program. Producers have felt it's been kind of overly complicated. Why was this, like, it seemed like they were trying to safeguard against, I don't know, misuse or whatever the decision was. And another comment that I received recently from a couple of large producers who stockpile feed to basically, how do you say, reduce the injury, like
Mitigate their own
Dave-
risk. Yep. Yeah.
you know, basically that's the risk management program. They carry at least a half year's feed over for events like this. And both these guys are running 600, well, one runs 600 cows, plus he feeds everything, plus buying some more feeder calves. And another guy's 300 cows. Is that's a couple of their neighbors every year, they're out of feed by May, and their cows they're scrounging for feed and looking for feed. And these guys are going to get they feel they're going to get the full $200 per head. Whereas Dave and Gary, in both this situation, they got the initial 96 per head, but Dave's figuring on his 600 cows, he's only going to get about $30–40 on every one of his cows, because he's stockpiled managed feed, and that stockpile and managing feed does not come without a cost, but it's a cost that's not considered. So, you know, in some respects, while we're happy, or I'm happy to see it reach, you know, the program, it almost, in some respects, it kind of encourages bad management decisions by some producers.
So I hear you, Colin. I think I could agree it wasn't without flaw. Yeah, and as to the planning of how it was going to be administered, I don't want to speak too much to that.
Oh.
AFSC we administered what we were told to administer, right? And I'm not,
Well, everybody
that sounds very much passing the buckish,
no,
and that's
but
not my
everybody was
intention.
under the gun. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
when it turned hot in June there, boy, that came with vengeance. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden people realized they were in trouble.
It happened really fast. And if I could just go back to the first comment you made, because I don't think my presentation, I don't think I show how truly excited I am for these changes to our pasture insurance, for everybody to understand, you know, how many, last year when it was not raining and we had day after day after day in the South, I'm speaking, you know, I'm from Clarkson, and that hayland and that pasture went backwards every single day.
I'm north of Edmonton. It did the same here, dude.
It did the same there. Exactly.
No,
And
I received my notification of renewal this year, and when I came across that comment section there, I was extremely happy to see that. And I think anybody who's been buying moisture deficiency insurance is going to be extremely happy with that, because
thanks for that.
it was, you know, it's not just moisture. When you have that high evapotranspiration rate, nothing grows. It just
Nothing
fries.
grows.
And that was what was happening. So I'm really happy to see that safeguard there.
I'm just going to interject here for a minute, because we're getting on close to 8 o'clock. We've got people sitting here for an hour and a half. So, and we want to get to resolution. So we really appreciate your comments, Colin. And I think one thing that we learned from working through this ag recovery is that maybe we need something that triggers a little bit faster next time, but we're keeping working on it. ABP is working with AFSC, and we are continuing to work on the business risk management programs, and hopefully we'll be able to move ahead with that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say that if anybody has any more questions, they can call their AFSC office.
Melanie, can I put I'll put my email in the chat.
Sure.
I'll probably, if anybody wanted me to stay till the end to actually talk, but I'm also totally fine to put my email address. You send me an email, I'll call anybody tomorrow and talk to them. So that's probably what I'll do, and log off and let you continue with your meeting. And I'll stay on for a little bit, make sure everybody got my email address, and we'll go from there.
Perfect. Thank you, Bobby Joe.
Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thanks. Brad, you wanted to say something before CCA comes on?
Yes, I'm sorry. I just wanted to interject for a moment. I missed one of my staff members, Karen Schmidt, and I apologize for that, Karen. But I just wanted to recognize Karen as another one. Also worked very hard this past year.
Our research gal. Thanks. Thanks, Brad. All right, so next we were going to move on to the Canadian Cattlemen's Association, that we are lucky enough to have our president, Bob Lowe, here tonight to give a presentation on what the CCA has been up to. Bob, I will just say that his reign was unfortunately overshadowed by COVID these past 2 years, but he has been at the helm for the last 2 years. And so Bob, I'm gonna let you take it away.
Thanks, Mel. Can you hear me?
You bet.
More importantly, can Caitlin hear me? Because she's the important one in this presentation.
I sure can.
Okay. And I'd like to start off by saying the last time I talked to you, Bobby Joe, I think you were a penner. So I think congratulations are in order. I guess you guys, Mel introduced me, so I'll just get right at it because we're running out of time. Move ahead a little bit, Caitlin. We'll start off with this slide, and that's the structure of the CCA. The $2 of the checkoff, which is the refundable portion, finances the CCA policy division. The other side of us, the operating divisions, that money comes from the $250 from the national levy that is non-refundable. There's one thing missing on this chart, and that is that Canadian Beef Breeds Council has come in as a division of CCA, so we welcome them to the fold. It's one of those things, the more people you get at the table, the better the decisions will be. Next, Caitlin. We're talking about the expense allocations, and this is totally towards the operating division. CCA is strictly a policy organization. That's all we do. Our mission is to move the bar for the whole industry in Canada. As you can see from this graph, 13% of our funding is Office Administration Communications. The other 87% is all policy. That's our job. That's what we do. Now she's making me hurry. When we go, now we go back. We'll go to the next one, Caitlin. Our revenue, we get our revenue, as Mel explained or Brad explained, 53 cents from every head marketed in Canada. Of course, Alberta is the biggest part of that because Alberta has half the cows, half the marketing. So they are the biggest part. You'll have to go back a little bit. The 40, I think it was fairly well explained. We came up, the members came to CCA, the members of the provinces said 48 cents. We said 48 cents is what we need to operate. The members said, yes, but you better build your own reserves because we don't want to have to put in our reserves every time you run out of money for one thing or another. Their reserves were mostly put in due to the forecasted reduction in marketings. That's where the 53 cents comes in. You can see 312,000 in interest in investments. We sold our interest in Bixus, and that was 250,000. we put that into a money fund, and basically that's where this 312,000 of interest and investments comes in. Next, Caitlin. Some of our policy highlights, and I'll spend a little bit of time on this slide, and then I'll go through the rest, most of the rest pretty fast. Our beef trade numbers are up 39% in value in 2021. Now that's to the end of November, and that's over 2020, which was a record year. Our investment in trade has paid off hugely for the industry. A couple of things that got done that kind of went under a lot of people's radar. After 18 years, we ended up with negligible risk status for BSE. And some of us, I see Gordon Graves shaking his head, are old enough to remember that far back. But this has been, it's a huge thing. It gives us the best status in the world. And we're on the same playing field now as the US, which is our biggest customer and our biggest competitor. I won't go into the BRMs much. Mel did a good job on that, but in the ag stability framework, we got the reference margin limit. We did our part, I should say, from a federal standpoint to get the reference margin limit removed, which is the one big thing to make ag stability work better for cow-calf producers. The other thing that I'd like to talk about a little bit is the Animal Transportation Act. And I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, I was at a roundtable in Ottawa, and the CFIA said, this is what it's going to be. We need to remember that public perception is every bit as important as science. And if it happened up to me, I would have said, well, that's it. It's bad, but that's what it is. Well, there was a few people in CCA that would not give up on that. And there was a change in the hierarchy of the CFIA. So what they came up with in the end was, instead of like in the legislation, it's 36 hours and the cattle have to be, I believe that's right. Miles would correct me if he was on here. And the animal would have to get off and have an 8-hour rest. Well, they've added 4 hours to that time frame. If the animals are healthy and happy, that gets cattle from Western Canada into the feeding area of Ontario. The big thing that came out of this, I think, is they are committed to look at the research that DCRC is carrying out with AAFC and the U of S. If that research says that it's probably beneficial to leave the cattle on the truck rather than let them off for 15 minutes and put them back, or 8 hours and put them back on, CFIA is willing to look at that research before they actually write anything in stone. So that's a big win. I think the only thing I'm going to say to this slide is for the COVID-19, and I'll echo Mel, if you didn't know what CCA was doing during COVID-19, it's because you didn't want to. We held town halls, we had weekly board meetings for a while. We still have industry leaders meetings. I think they've moved to every 2 weeks. Every Monday morning, we had two major focuses. Make sure that the producers in Canada knew exactly what was going on all the time, and do our best to make sure that government kept the borders open, kept trade open, kept our commodities flowing. Mel touched on the supports for the drought and the wildfires. The thing about this drought that we went through is, where I live, we're kind of used to drought, but we've never seen a drought. I don't think anybody's seen a drought this big that covered so much of North America, basically the western half of North America. We all know what that did for feed. I know southern Alberta, the feeding industry is relying on corn from basically Iowa. That comes with its own list of problems. The other thing that unless you were really involved in it, you probably didn't realize it, but the UN, every 25 years, the UN has, they refigure out how they're going to feed the world. And basically, and we'll get into this in a chart a little later, but by the end of this process, we'd convince the world that we are global leaders in sustainable agriculture in Canada. Okay, next slide, Caitlin. I kind of got into this one. I'm not sure if we need to go too far. The border things are a pretty big deal in Alberta. I mean, we're on record as wanting a delay in the vaccine requirements for truckers. Apparently being on record isn't quite good enough. We'll see where that goes. I'm not going to say what I think. Next slide, Caitlin. This slide just shows our export values, and when it started climbing in 2013, that's when China came onto the market, or not. And this shows, basically, this really shows where our trade file has taken us. Next slide, Caitlin. Oh, this is where we've gone. Because of our exporting, it's increased the value of every animal killed in Canada by $775 a head. And this shows our increase in exports, 22% in volume, 39% in value. You know, that the volume is one thing, the value is the really big thing. And it shows that a lot of that is in offals, things that we don't necessarily eat, but are in really high demand in other parts of the world. And we found those places. I believe the number is 58 different countries we export parts of a cow to. Next slide, Caitlin. Here's our top export markets. And as you can see, we're still the top. 77% of the beef eaten in Canada is produced in Canada. That's expected to grow to 80% in 2020. Followed by US. Having said that, 50% of what we produce is exported. 70% of that goes to the US. They are our biggest customer, our biggest contributor. And, you know, just a little bit to get into this, Alberta is the big cattle province in Canada. I believe it's pushing 80% of what Alberta produces through our 3 major federally inspected plants is exported outside of Alberta. And to put that into numbers that are a little easier to understand, the 3 federally inspected plants in Alberta produce enough beef to feed 43 million people in a year. There's 4.3 million people in Alberta, and a lot of the meat that they're eating comes from provincially inspected plants that can't leave the province. So carry on another one, Caitlin. And this is all our trade, which is our biggest file. It's where we make our money, is in foreign trade. I guess what I'll say here is we're entering into a free trade agreement with the UK. We have stated to our trade people in Ottawa, and actually I was at a meeting with the High Commissioner from the UK before Christmas. If a free trade agreement with the UK is going to be a spin-off of CETA, the beef industry wants nothing to do with it. We will not support it at all. So that's the High Commissioner, and I don't know how much power they have within government, but she actually said, we're starting a new free trade agreement. We are not following CETA. She said that at a breakfast meeting. So see where it goes. We're in CETA. We have to do the best we can with CETA. And part of the problem there is they won't accept our carcass wash things. But the other part of the problem is we don't have enough cattle to meet the demand. That's our own issue, and that's what we're trying to do with that. Is, you know, one of the suggestions we've given to CFIA is, rather than have to have a CFIA trained vet to inspect premises to be EU, to audit premises to meet the EU standards, why can't the VBP auditors do that if you go get your VBP plus audit? they're looking at it. How seriously, we don't know. Time will tell. Next slide, Caitlin. BSE, I talked about that. We're working with different countries on an individual basis to remove the restrictions that we had from being minimal risk to negligible risk. As far as our biggest partner goes, one of the things is the SRM removal. Right now, our plants have to, it's called the long list, and I believe it's 54 kilograms of material that our plants have to remove and incinerate, as opposed to, I think it's 1 kilogram on the short list, which is what the US says. That's a pretty major restriction for our plants, a pretty major cost that our plants bear that the US plants don't have to. Another one is carcass segregation, mostly going into Korea, and that mostly affects Ontario. But they're really their second or third bidder on the market is a plant south of the border. But that plant sends a lot of cattle to Korea. So when they brought Canadian cattle in, they had to segregate them. It was their own separate day, their own separate everything, because Korea said, or in the case of a BSE, Korea would shut the border down or shut the exports to Korea off. That plant did not want to be caught in that if we had a BSE. Next slide. Oh, we went through the animal transportation regulations. There's an organization started probably 4 or 5 years ago, and it's government, both federal, provincial. I think all the animal commodity groups are there, called Animal Health Canada, and it's basically a place to have a plan so that everybody agrees a plan is in place. So if we get something, the burning issue right now is African swine fever. You don't have to get everybody on board. Everybody is on board. There's a plan there, how to go about it, compensation, how do you eliminate it, whether it's mass destruction, whatever it is. The plan is there and everybody's agreed before these things take place. It's got some big potential, and as of, I think, last fall, all the provinces had signed on. Dave Moss was really instrumental in this. Traceability is a big thing there. The FMD bank, did you talk about that, Mel? I think you did. I don't need to go there. The big holdup, it seems, with the FMD bank is the money. I believe it would cost $3 million, and what that works out to is that's not enough money to actually go to Treasury with, but it's too much money for Ag Canada to take on. So that's kind of where that's sitting. Next slide. Domestic ag, that came up quite big in the drought, as you can imagine. The reference margin limit is good. One thing that we're pushing really hard for on agri-stability is either a substantial increase to the cap or the removal of the cap completely. Drought relief, all I'll say about that, and I was on a Ag Committee, Federal Agriculture Canada Committee hearing today. One of our major pushes is for ag recovery to have a few things that we know that work, and we pretty much know what they're going to cost. Have them on the shelf. And the example we use is set aside. We know set aside works. We've used it twice, works really well. Pretty much figure out the cost of it. Have that on the shelf so you don't have to wait a month or 6 weeks to get something happening. It just, if some parameters are hit, it comes off the shelf and boom, it's there. I think Mel mentioned a little bit about that. We sat down here in the South watching hay head to Montana because we didn't know if we were going to be able to afford it or not. So, and we've got our list of priorities for the next ag policy framework. I can get that to anybody if they have a real burning desire to see it, but I can't tell you what it is right now. Next slide, please, Caitlin. Climate change, and Mel mentioned our push on the environment. And she's right, we've committed a lot of staff time, a lot of man hours, and a lot of money to kind of, I'll say, refreshing our image. We have a government that's been elected twice now on a climate change initiative. I think this is the way the globe is going. It doesn't matter what government we have in Canada, it's always going to be there. These are a few of the things where we're going with that, but in a nutshell, we want the federal government to recognize the cattle industry as much as an environmental industry as a food industry. And it seems to be working. We're getting into places that we've never been able to get in before. They're starting to see that we're green. Next slide, please. The environment, which you guys, those of you that have been around long enough know, that's been my big thing, and I'm not even going to get into this. Environment was, it was the thing that if you looked at surveys from 10 years ago, if economies were doing well, they were really worried about the environment. If the economies weren't doing well, environment was way down the list. Well, environment has moved its way to the top of everybody's thinking everywhere. It's become a huge file in CCA to the point that we've basically got 1.5 people staffing it instead of one person. Fawn, part of her position now is climate change, which frees up Larry Thomas to do the rest of the environment things. Next slide, please, Caitlin. Now we'll get to the Food Systems Summit, and this is kind of where environment, or why environment has got so big. And I'll put in a little plug for the public and stakeholder engagement, why that is such a necessary thing going forward. The UN, I started to say that, has every 25 years, they redo their, I guess, 25-year policy on how to feed the world. This year, they started out with a very obvious, blatant anti-animal agriculture bent to it. So they host these dialogues. They do them all over the world. We, in partnership with Nature Conservancy Canada, hosted 3 of them in Canada. And what these dialogues are is different people just speak about different things on how their industry plans on feeding the world. Not everybody agrees, of course. I did hear one thing, and this was an FAO scientist brought this out on one of these dialogues, that 0.6 kilograms of plant protein when eaten by a cow turns into 1 kilogram of animal protein. And that's basically because there's not a whole lot of protein in most of a plant, but when it goes through the process in the rumen, rumen is a wonderful thing, as one of our vets told us once. That's a number that nobody ever hears, and this came from an FAO scientist, basically a UN scientist. Anyway, to make a long story short, after these 3 dialogues, and the Canadian cattle industry, the CCA, we basically led the world on the animal agriculture front, and we led Canada on a total agriculture front. We got all of the ag commodity groups in Canada together. They started putting dialogues together. We were part of theirs. They were part of ours. When it came out in the end, the UN, in their final summation, and their statement was, we need a balanced agricultural system in the world. Now, they didn't say that we need animal agriculture, but they did say we need a balanced system, which is a pretty big step forward from get rid of animal agriculture. Our own government, and I don't know if, well, you can read this as good as I can. This guy is Canada's permanent representative of Food and Agriculture Organization. This is what he had to say about livestock producers. This, to me, was probably, in my opinion, for the sustainability of the cattle industry, not only in Canada, but globally, this was probably the biggest thing we did this year. And so I'm pretty proud of it. Don't know if it'll work, but we shifted global thinking a little bit. And next slide, Caitlin. And I think we're at the end. And speaking of animal agriculture, we ended up, of course, the alternative proteins came out, and there is going to be a future for cell cultured proteins. This subject came to us from a lot of people all over Canada, and it was kind of getting spread around different committees. We decided it was big enough, we needed a new committee. So we've got the Food Policy Committee. It's staffed by Jennifer Babcock in Ottawa. And it deals with anything to do with alternative or cell cultured proteins. The cell cultured stuff has been pretty minor. Plant-based has been pretty big. What they're really dealing with now is front of pack labeling, making sure that the plant-based protein people, Beyond Meats, Impossible Meats, are what they're putting on their label is exactly what they are. Don't put a picture of a cow on the label of a plant-based burger, which is what they're doing. CFIA has regulations to guide this sort of thing, but they aren't upholding them. So we're, through our Food Policy Committee, we're pointing out what's wrong and where this is in contravention of CFIA's regulations that are already there, and maybe where we need more regulations. We aren't going to let them get a free ride. You know, one of the things is we don't feel a plant-based hamburger should be in the meat counter. But although if you saw some of the pictures that I saw of meat counters when COVID first started, it was the Beyond Meat burgers that were still there. And I think that's it, other than our beef industry conference. And this one, I can honestly say, I think it would take a nuclear war to stop this conference. I do not believe that the conference committee will let it stop a third time. And I don't believe the BC Cattlemen's will let it stop a third time. This is going to be a great conference. There's going to be some tours. Tours will be in conjunction with the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. They're having a meeting there, their annual meeting. It's just, there's people, I got around in the States a little bit before Christmas, and there's just a whole bunch of state organizations want to come up. There's the NCBA will be there in presence. Hopefully a ton of producers. It's just going to be a great thing. And I'd encourage everybody to mark it on their calendar, because it's, like I say, unless there's a nuclear war, which I guess that is a slight possibility right now, but unless there's a nuclear war, it is going to go on. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions. If you are live, you get Dennis, who could present you with the facts. But if you got questions now, you just get the story.
Thanks, Bob. We are all very much looking forward to that trip to BC in August. Anybody have any questions for Bob? Gordon?
Not really a question, but Bob, you've been around and in the environmental side of the livestock sector for years, and most people probably aren't aware of the hard work you did when the SARA tried to really be heavy-handed in the southeast with the greater sage grouse. And that work was mostly unnoticed and unappreciated, but trust me, the industry owes you a huge round of applause for what you did there. That work is continuing on with endangered species provincially and federally, and I did get permission to share this with this group tonight. For the first time ever in endangered species, the biologists have reworded recommendations to the minister to consider compensating landowners for endangered species. The first time ever. Maybe not happen, but damn it, Bob, between you and me, that's been a hell of a long uphill struggle. But just, I am so pleased with the work you did and the guidance you gave me when I came on board. Man, I'll tell you, people don't have a clue what you've done.
Well, it wasn't me, it was a group of us, Gordon, but thank you very much. And the other thing it did lead to was SARPEL, which has been a great thing.
Thanks, Gordon. Anybody else? I just want to highlight your point on how amazing cattle are at converting plant to animal protein and how efficient they are at it. And I've always said cows are amazing animals, and thankful for the protein that they do provide, because it's an amazing thing, like you said, that the rumen does. So if that's it, thank you so much, Bob. Thanks for being here again tonight and for following us around to all our meetings. We really appreciated having CCA along with us.
I did make a commitment when I left the chair of ABP that I would never, ever go to all the ABB fall meetings again. And all that does is say, don't ever say never.
All right, thanks, Bob. Okay, so we are now going to move into the resolutions portion of the meeting. As a reminder, when you're voting on resolutions, we ask that you only vote on a resolution if it is brought forward from your zone. You can once again reference the zone map in the chat if you need clarification of where you live. We will we'll use the raise the hand button for voting, either in favor, we'll ask for in favor, and then we will ask for opposed. So if you could raise your hands if it's from your zone. And the process, just for clarification, is a mover will bring forward a resolution and it will be typed on the screen. I'll read it, announce the mover, and then call for a seconder. The resolution will then be open for discussion. And once the discussion is complete, I will ask the mover to close and we will then call for a vote. So I believe we have one resolution in from the, is it this? Yeah, it's the central zone. So this mover was Adam Mosasan. Sorry, I'm very bad with last names tonight, obviously. And so this resolution is that, sorry, I have to just move my people here because I can't see the whole thing, is that whereas wildlife damage to swath grazing can be an extreme cost to producers and not covered under any programs after October 31st, therefore be it resolved to lobby the government, the provincial government, to have AFSC add wildlife damages to swath grazing after October 31st to present wildlife damage compensation program for annual crops. So could we have a seconder for this motion from the central zone?
Colin Campbell will second it.
Thank you, Colin. Adam, would you like to speak to this? Is Adam on?
I don't think Adam's on, but he did submit this through a staff member, so I believe we can still consider it.
So he's not on? Sorry, I missed that.
No.
Okay, so we could still open this up for discussion. Is there anybody that would like to discuss this motion before we go to vote on it? Sorry, I can only see 4 people on my screen, so I'm leaning on you, Caitlin. Gordon?
I'm not, like, this might be worded a little differently, but I'm positive I've seen very similar resolutions in the past. So wouldn't this qualify as just refortifying resolutions that we've had and resubmitting?
I don't know how to comment on that. Do you have a comment on it, Brad?
So, you're probably correct, Gordon, and I would have to go back and look through some of the historical records. But I think going forward, as we have Mark that is working with our governance committee, and we're going to be updating all of our policies, I think it's still fine to send this resolution on if the group so feels that they would like to. We will still consider it through the resolution committee, either at the board or at the AGM. And if it is redundant, we can always make sure that we have combined it with something else going forward, or it will stand on its own, depending on if it passes.
Does anybody else have any comments?
Mel, I did talk to Adam, so do you want me to provide some context?
Sure, that would be great.
Yeah, okay, so for the AFSC wildlife damage program, it doesn't apply after October 31st. So operations, especially in Northern Alberta, Adam isn't from Northern, but operations are heavily impacted if they try to employ swath grazing and they have elk or heavy mule deer populations around. And what that does is it just prevents them from utilizing swath grazing, even though Alberta Agriculture still promotes it as a sound practice, which was Adam's point. When we brought this up previously to Environment and Parks, they basically said that, well, you shouldn't be swath grazing if you have lots of wildlife, and that's why Adam decided to bring this forward as a resolution.
Thank you. So that puts it in a little bit more context. If there's no other discussion, we would normally ask the mover to close, but he is not here. So maybe we'll ask the seconder to close. Don't know if that's the right way to do it. And we call for a vote.
Yeah, or yeah, I would suggest you probably, and if Colin doesn't have any further, we could just move to the vote.
Perfect. Colin, you good with us moving forward?
Would you repeat that again, Mel?
We're ready to close this motion. I don't have the mover here. Are you willing to close so we can go?
Yeah, I'll close the motion.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so only people from Central Zone, could we please have those in favor of this? You can raise your hands.
I think I'm the only one on.
No, I see at least 3 other hands, but I don't see a full screen, so hopefully Caitlin's capturing the number.
I am.
Okay, do you need them to lower their hands?
Yeah, I've got 4 in favor and then.
So if you could lower your hands, and then I'm going to ask if there's anybody opposed to this motion from the Central Zone. Does not look like it, so it's carried. All right, so if we could move on, if there are any other resolutions, if you could please state your name and the zone you are from, and we can type it up on the screen. Doesn't look like we have any more at this time. Brad, resolutions closed tonight?
Yes, they do. This is the final night for resolutions in this format, but you can submit. Anything from here will go to the resolution committee, and then it will be decided whether it's going to the board for a decision or to the AGM. Any resolutions that come in after that won't be considered for this AGM necessarily. They would go, you can submit a resolution at any time, but we have to draw a point for this upcoming AGM.
Right. So I'll do a final call. Is there any other resolutions from any of the other zones, or any zone, sorry? All right, doesn't look like it. Pretty quiet group. So if that is it, then I want to thank everybody. I know we've run a little bit late this evening, but I really, really, truly appreciate all of you that have joined us tonight. Your opinions influence ABP policies, priorities, and activities for the coming year. And ABP is we are proud to be a grassroots producer organization, and your input is always critical to the resolution process. I just want to finish by adding that obviously this has been an extremely tough year with lots of challenges and uncertainties in our industry. And I wish all of you out there that are calving cows out this spring, I hope you have a smooth and safe season. And I hope that the spring brings our industry some renewed optimism and good things ahead. Thank you, everybody. And I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Oh,
Mel?
Brad, you have something to say?
If I could, I just want to
Sure.
take that opportunity as well to thank everyone. And I wanted just to quickly address that Alberta Beef Producers is working very, very closely with the Canadian Cattlemen's Association, Alberta Cattle Feeders Association, as well as the other AGLA or stock growers in the whole situation that is taking place down at the border. You will have noticed that Alberta Beef Producers, along with those other two organizations, did release a statement. It's a very challenging situation. We continue to monitor it, and we will continue to work with the other organizations. But at this point in time, we do feel that this is growing beyond Alberta Beef Producers, beyond just what we can do. So we continue to support, and we play a supportive role, especially around the CCA, as we navigate and continue to watch what's taking place at the border. I just wanted to address that to let producers know that yes, we are watching it, but it's a very challenging situation. Thanks, Mel.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, everybody, for coming tonight.
Meeting adjourned?
Meeting adjourned.